Imagine this for a moment. 10 years ago, on a Saturday night, the line outside the hottest nightclub in any major city stretched around the block, almost entirely men, wallets in hand, ready to pay 50, 80, even $100 just for the chance to step inside a room full of women who walked in for free. Fast forward to today, and those same clubs are paying promoters to drag men through the door, offering free entry, free drinks, anything they can think of. Because without men, the entire business model collapses overnight. What changed in a single decade that flipped the entire nightlife economy upside down? And why is the one group that used to be celebrated as the main attraction now quietly described by club owners as the reason their venues are bleeding money and closing forever? Stay with me until the very end, because by the time we finish, you're going to see exactly why millions of men made a decision that is reshaping society in real time, and why most of them have zero intention of ever going back. If you enjoy straight talking, no filter content like this from the angry guy, smash that like button right now, share this video with every man you know who needs to hear it, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss an upload. And if you are serious about protecting everything you work for in a world that feels increasingly stacked against men, go check out Angry's Crypto Academy right now. The full academy is linked in the description below. It teaches you step by step how to buy, store, trade, and grow your wealth in the one space the system still cannot fully control. Click that link and get started today. And if these videos fire you up and keep you sharp, you can always buy me a Red Bull through the link in the description. Every can keeps the content coming strong. Let's get into it. Nightclubs are not just struggling, they are dying at a speed that nobody in the industry saw coming. Promoters who used to make six figures a year just by filling guest lists are now begging men to show up. Venues that once turned away hundreds of guys at the door are printing flyers that say men enter free all night, while women now have to pay cover for the first time in decades. And the reason is painfully simple: the men stopped coming. Not some men, not the guys who never went out anyway. The core group of regular spending, high value men who used to keep the entire ecosystem alive simply looked around one day, decided the return on investment was no longer worth it, and walked away. And once that critical mass disappeared, the whole house of cards started to fall. Think about how the nightclub model worked for years. Clubs let women in for free because women were the draw. Men showed up, paid premium cover charges, bought overpriced bottles, purchased rounds of drinks they hoped might earn them a smile or a conversation. The club made money from the men, the women got validation and free drinks, and everyone pretended the arrangement was fair. It was a transaction everyone understood, even if nobody said it out loud. Then something shifted. Men began asking a very reasonable question: why am I paying all this money for the privilege of being in a room where the majority of people have already decided I am the problem? Why am I funding an experience that increasingly feels designed to humiliate me, record me, or lecture me the moment I open my mouth? And the honest answer they arrived at was, there is no good reason. So they left. Now, club owners will tell you in private conversations they never thought would leak that women have gone from the greatest asset a venue could have to the single biggest liability on the balance sheet. Because without men buying drinks, the money stops flowing. A room full of women expecting free entry and complimentary cocktails is a room that loses money every single hour it stays open. Bartenders stop making tips, DJs stop getting paid, promoters stop getting their cut, and the entire operation grinds to a halt. One major promoter in Miami was quoted last year saying he can bring in 500 women on any given Saturday, but if there are fewer than 50 men spending real money, the night is a financial disaster. That is the new reality. And it is not just nightclubs. Speed dating events that used to have balanced ratios now routinely end an hour early because zero men register. One organizer in London posted numbers showing an event with 987 women signed up and exactly 3 men. 3. They canceled the whole thing and issued refunds because there was literally no point in opening the doors. Singles mixers, dance classes, even cooking workshops marketed to young professionals are seeing the same pattern. Women show up in droves, men do not show up at all. The scarcity is now so extreme that some event companies have started offering cash incentives, gift cards, free drinks, anything they can think of, just to get a handful of men in the room to keep the women from complaining. How did we get here? It did not happen overnight. It built up over years, layer by layer, message by message, until the average man woke up one day and realized the social contract he had been taught to honor no longer existed. For decades, men were told in 1,000 different ways that their presence was the problem, that their attention was unwanted, that their natural instincts were toxic, that simply existing in public as a man made them a potential threat. Turn on any television show, open any social media feed, scroll through the trending topics, and the message was consistent. Men need to do better. Men need to change. Men need to give women space. Men need to shut up and listen. And at some point, men did exactly what they were told. They gave women space, a lot of it. They stopped approaching in bars because every viral video seemed to show a woman screaming for security the moment a man said hello. They stopped offering to buy drinks because the new etiquette declared it creepy and transactional. They stopped commenting on appearance because the wrong compliment could end up on TikTok with millions of views and their full name in the caption. They stopped asking women out at the gym, at the grocery store, at the coffee shop because the rules kept moving, and the punishment for breaking a rule you did not know existed could be life altering. So they did the one thing that was still allowed. They opted out. And once they opted out, something interesting happened. They discovered life without all of that noise was actually pretty good, peaceful even. Turns out, when you stop chasing validation from people who have spent years telling you your validation is worthless, you suddenly have a lot more time, money, and mental bandwidth for yourself. Men started traveling solo, picking up hobbies they always wanted to try, building businesses, hitting the gym at times when nobody was filming, reading books, learning skills, stacking money, and sleeping better than they had in years. The anger that used to boil over from constant rejection and public shaming slowly gave way to something calmer, acceptance. And with acceptance came a realization being alone is not the same as being lonely. In fact, for a lot of men, being alone started to feel like freedom. Meanwhile, the women who spent years demanding that men leave them alone began to notice the silence. At first, they celebrated it. Finally, no more unwanted attention, no more creepy messages, no more guys sliding into the DMs. But then the silence kept going and going. The likes stopped coming in the same numbers. The dating apps that once overflowed with options started showing the same tired profiles recycled week after week. The matches stopped messaging first. The guys who did match stopped offering to plan real dates. Restaurants on Friday nights started having plenty of open tables. Coffee shops on Sunday afternoons looked a little emptier. And the women who spent years broadcasting that they did not need a man suddenly discovered that a world without men willing to engage is a world that feels strangely cold. Social media is now full of videos from women asking the same question in 100 different accents. Where have all the good men gone? Some of them sound confused. Some of them sound angry. A few of them sound scared. They post statistics about loneliness epidemics and birth rates and economic contribution gaps, as if reading numbers out loud will magically summon men back to a table. They were told repeatedly they were never welcome at in the first place. They make demands. Men need to step up. Men need to take accountability. Men need to fix this. But the men are not watching those videos. They unsubscribed a long time ago. They are out on boats they bought with the money they used to spend on bottle service. They are in gyms that open at 5 a.m. where nobody is taking selfies. They are in coffee shops, reading books with noise canceling headphones on. They are living quieter, simpler, richer lives. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. And most of them have zero intention of giving that up just because someone finally noticed they left. And here's the part that drives the loudest voices absolutely crazy. Men did exactly what they were asked to do. They gave women space. They stopped approaching. They stopped simping. They stopped paying for attention. They took all the lectures to heart and applied them with ruthless consistency. And now that the results are in, now that the nightclubs are empty and the dating events are canceled and the apps are graveyards, the same voices who spent years cheering every step of this process are suddenly furious that men actually listen. You cannot make this up. For years, the message was clear. Men are the problem. Masculinity is toxic. Attention from men is harassment. Chivalry is dead, and women gave the last rites. So men killed chivalry, buried it 6 feet deep, and walked away from the grave without looking back. And now the complaint is that men are not showing up, not spending money, not providing the energy and resources that every social venue, from nightclubs to dating apps, was built on top of. The cognitive dissonance would be hilarious if it was not so predictable. Look at the numbers coming out of the nightlife industry alone. Major clubs in Los Angeles, New York, Miami, London, all reporting the same trend. Male attendance down between 40 and 70%, depending on the night and the venue, while female attendance is either flat or, in some cases, actually higher than before because promoters keep offering bigger and bigger incentives. Bottle sales, the real profit center for any high end club, have collapsed in some markets by as much as 80% on weeknights. Promoters who used to compete for the hottest tables now compete for the handful of men willing to spend it all. One club in Vegas started a policy where any guy who buys a table gets 10 free entries for his friends because they literally cannot find enough men to fill the room otherwise. And the craziest part is that none of this was subtle. Men did not disappear overnight. They sent signals for years. They talked about going their own way. They made memes about planting flags on Mount Peace. They created entire online communities dedicated to the idea that a man's time, money, and attention are his own to spend however he chooses. And every step of the way, those signals were mocked, dismissed, called incel nonsense, told they would change their minds when they got older or hornier or lonelier, except they did not change their minds. They doubled down. They got better at being alone. They got better at enjoying their own company. They got better at building lives that do not require external validation from people who spent years telling them their validation was worthless. That is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Men did not just walk away from nightclubs, they walked away from the entire script. The one that said your value is measured by how much attention you can buy, how many women you can attract, how willing you are to play a game where the rules only apply to you. They looked at the scoreboard, saw it was rigged, and decided the smartest play was not to demand new rules. It was to leave the casino entirely and build something better with the money they used to lose at the tables. And now the casino is empty. The lights are still flashing, the music is still playing, but the high rollers are gone. They are on fishing boats in the middle of nowhere with no cell service. They are in cabins they built themselves. They are riding motorcycles across countries where nobody knows their name. They are drinking beer around fire pits with other men who made the same choice and discovered that real connection does not require a cover charge or a dress code or the approval of strangers on the internet. The nightclubs were just the first domino to fall. What you are watching is the beginning of something much larger, a quiet revolution built on one simple idea. A man's peace is worth more than any amount of attention he used to pay for. And once enough men discover that truth for themselves, there is no speech, no viral video, no amount of shaming that will ever convince them to give that peace away again. The domino that fell in the nightclub was loud enough to hear across the entire culture, but most people still pretend they cannot hear it. They think this is just about bottle service and cover charges. It is not. It is about the moment when millions of men looked at every social institution that had spent years telling them they were defective for being born male and quietly decided those institutions could figure out how to survive without their money, their labor, their attention, and their willingness to play the villain whenever a story needed one. The nightclub collapse is only the most visible symptom of a much deeper shift that is happening right now in real time, and it is accelerating every single day. Let us go back a little further so you can see exactly how deliberate this walkaway has been. For decades, men were sold a very specific dream: work hard, earn money, stay in shape, learn how to talk to women, and one day you will be rewarded with a loyal partner, a family, respect in your community, and a life that feels like it has meaning. That was the contract. Millions of men honored that contract every single day. They put in the hours at jobs they hated. They hit the gym when they were exhausted. They read books on how to be better communicators. They saved money. They planned dates. They showed up. And then, slowly at first, and then all at once, the rules changed without any announcement. Suddenly, the same effort that used to be celebrated became evidence that you were part of the problem. Wanting a traditional relationship made you controlling. Wanting a partner who took care of her body the same way you took care of yours made you shallow. Offering to pay for dinner made you a walking wallet. Complimenting a woman made you a creep. Looking at a woman made you a predator. Talking to a woman made you an interrupter of her peace. Existing in the same zip code as a woman who later decided she did not like the way you breathed apparently made you guilty of something that required public shaming and permanent social exile. The goalposts did not just move, they were loaded onto a truck and driven into another country while men were told to keep running anyway. At the same time, every failure of a woman to find the relationship she claimed she wanted was blamed on men collectively. Not enough men approaching. The men who do approach are low quality. The high quality men are intimidated by strong women. The high quality men are hiding. The high quality men have commitment issues. The high quality men were ruined by pornography or video games or their mothers or capitalism or toxic masculinity or the patriarchy that somehow still exists, even though men are now the majority of workplace deaths, suicides, homeless, imprisoned, and educational dropouts. The list of excuses grew longer every year. But the one thing that never appeared on the list was the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the constant public demonization of men might have consequences. And consequences always come. Men are very simple creatures when you strip away all the noise. Show us a fair game and we will play it harder than anyone else on earth. Change the rules without telling us and we will still try to adapt for a while. But lie to us long enough, punish us for following the old rules, reward the people who break them, and then act surprised when we finally notice the game is rigged. And we will do the one thing we always do when something is no longer worth our time. We will leave the field and build our own game somewhere else. That is exactly what is happening. The average man today is not sitting in his basement raging at women. He is in his apartment that he owns outright because he never had to save for a wedding or a divorce. He is driving a car he loves because he never had to trade it in for a minivan. He is eating steak on Tuesday night because nobody is telling him it has to be taco night to keep someone else happy. He wakes up on Saturday morning with zero obligations except the ones he chose for himself. He goes to jujitsu or boxing or hiking or fishing or the gun range or the gym at 5 a.m. or all of the above because his time is finally his own. He has a circle of male friends who have made the same choice and who actually show up when life gets hard instead of posting inspirational quotes and then disappearing when the bill comes. He has money in accounts that nobody can touch in a divorce. He sleeps 8 hours a night because nobody is starting an argument at 11 p.m. over something that happened in 2017. He is calm. He is focused. He is healthy. He is wealthy in ways that have nothing to do with how much attention he can buy on a Saturday night. And the most dangerous part for the old system is that he is not miserable. He is not lonely in the way people keep insisting he must be. He is genuinely happier than he has ever been. That is the part nobody knows how to fight. You can shame a man who is unhappy. You can mock a man who is desperate. You can threaten a man who still believes he needs something from the system. But you cannot negotiate with a man who has discovered that everything the system told him he needed to be happy was a lie, and that life on the other side of walking away is objectively better in every measurable way. That is why the tone has shifted so dramatically in the last couple of years. The videos used to be about how men need to man up, how men need to stop being intimidated, how men need to put in more effort. Now the videos are starting to sound a little scared. Where are all the men? Why aren't men dating? Why are men checking out? Why are birth rates collapsing? Why are young men refusing to work overtime? Why are young men refusing to go into debt for college degrees that lead nowhere? Why are young men building wealth instead of building families? The questions keep coming faster and faster because every month the answers become more obvious and less comfortable. The truth is that men did not disappear. They just stopped participating in systems that spent years telling them their participation was harmful. They did not go blind. They just stopped looking at people who spent years screaming that being looked at was violence. They did not lose their voices. They just stopped talking to people who spent years telling them that having a male voice was inherently dangerous. They did not become poor. They just stopped transferring their wealth to people who spent years telling them that having money made them oppressors. Every step of the way, men were told exactly what to do to make the world a better place. Leave women alone. Stop approaching. Stop staring. Stop commenting. Stop expecting sex after dinner. Stop expecting loyalty. Stop expecting gratitude. Stop expecting anything at all. And for the first time in history, a critical mass of men looked at each other, shrugged, and said, okay, message received. We will stop. And now the silence is deafening. You can see it in the dating app data. Male usage is plummeting while female usage keeps climbing because women keep searching for the men who are no longer there. You can see it in the marriage statistics. Men under 35 are opting out at rates that have never been recorded before. You can see it in the birth rates across every developed country on earth. You can see it in the explosive growth of male-only spaces from fight clubs to barber shops to online communities to entire industries built around the idea that men do not need permission to enjoy their own lives. And the most telling part is that none of this required a leader. There was no manifesto. There was no central organization. There was no march on Washington. It was millions of individual men making the same private calculation at roughly the same time. The cost of participation is now higher than the reward, and I choose peace. That is it. That is the entire revolution. A quiet, personal, unstoppable decision repeated a million times until the absence becomes impossible to ignore. Women are now experiencing what life looks like when men actually follow instructions, when men actually give all the space that was demanded, when men actually stop simping, stop chasing, stop paying, stop protecting, stop providing, stop caring what strangers on the internet think of them. And the results are coming in faster than any think piece can keep up with. Housing prices in major cities are finally showing signs of cooling because fewer men are buying houses they cannot afford to impress women who will never move in. Luxury retail is starting to feel the pinch because fewer men are buying designer clothes to get attention in clubs that no longer exist. High-end restaurants are cutting staff because Friday night tables are no longer booked solid by men trying to outspend each other for a phone number. Every industry that relied on male disposability is suddenly discovering what happens when men stop being disposable. And the best part, at least from the perspective of the men who made this choice, is that none of this required anger. You do not need to hate women to walk away. You just need to love yourself enough to stop accepting treatment that no other group on earth would be expected to tolerate. The men who are thriving right now are not the ones screaming on podcasts. They are the ones who quietly closed the apps, deleted the social media, sold the overpriced truck, paid off the debt, started lifting, started saving, started living. They are the ones who replace dating with purpose, replace validation with competence, replace chaos with calm, and they are multiplying every single day. The old world is scrambling for solutions. Bring back traditional values, but without any of the responsibilities men used to have. Shame men for not dating, but keep all the rules that made dating unbearable. Tell men they are needed, but only on terms that guarantee they will lose everything if things go wrong. Offer incentives for men to come back, but refuse to address any of the reasons they left in the first place. It is like watching someone try to put out a house fire with a garden hose while refusing to admit the stove is still on. Meanwhile, the men keep walking, they keep building, they keep improving, they keep stacking money and muscle and experiences and freedom. And every month that passes makes it less likely they will ever look back, because every month that passes proves they never needed the old system in the first place. We are still early in the story. What you are seeing in nightclubs today is going to look quaint in 5 years when the full impact hits every corner of society. Education, employment, family formation, politics, media, finance. Every institution that spent decades harvesting male energy while telling men their energy was toxic is about to discover what happens when the harvest stops coming in. And the craziest part of all is that none of this required violence, none of it required protest, none of it required permission. All it took was men deciding one by one that their peace was worth more than their performance. And once that decision reaches critical mass, there is no speech, no policy, no amount of shaming that can put the genie back in the bottle. The men are not lost. They are exactly where they want to be. And for the first time in a very long time, they are not asking anyone's permission to stay there. The shift did not stop at the nightclub door. It walked right past the velvet rope, past the dating apps, past the marriage industrial complex, and it is now standing in places most people never expected it to reach. It is in the university lecture halls where male enrollment has been dropping for 15 straight years, while administrators keep wondering why their diversity targets never seem to include men. It is in the human resources departments that spent a decade crafting policies built on the assumption that men would always show up, pay more, work longer, and never complain. It is in the family court waiting rooms that are finally starting to see fewer cases because fewer men are willing to sign the contract that puts everything they will ever earn at permanent risk. It is in the real estate listings where single men in their 20s and 30s are now the fastest growing group of first time homebuyers, purchasing small, efficient properties with cash or short mortgages because they never had to factor in someone else's student loans or desire for a 6 bedroom house in the suburbs. And it is everywhere, and it is quiet, and it is unstoppable. Let us talk about the workplace for a minute, because that is the next sacred cow that is about to get very nervous. For years, companies large and small operated on an unspoken truth. The most reliable employees were men who believed that working 80 hours a week, taking the dangerous assignments, staying late to fix someone else's mistake, and never asking for a raise would eventually be rewarded with stability, respect, and a family they could support. Those men were the backbone of every industry that actually makes the world run: construction, trucking, oil rigs, manufacturing, logistics, utilities, mining, fishing, farming, the trades, the jobs that nobody claps for until the power goes out or the grocery shelves are empty. And every one of those industries is now facing a labor shortage that no amount of signing bonuses can fix, because the young men coming up looked at their fathers, looked at their older brothers, looked at the divorces, the alimony, the child support orders, the overtime that never turned into ownership, the injuries that ended careers while the company moved on to the next warm body, and they said no thank you. They looked at the culture that told them their sacrifices were invisible and their complaints were privilege, and they chose something different. They chose trades on their own terms. They chose remote tech jobs that pay six figures from a laptop in a low cost state. They chose entrepreneurship where the upside is theirs alone. They chose seasonal work that pays cash and leaves 4 months a year free to travel. They chose minimalism and financial independence so that no corporation can ever hold their life hostage again. They chose sleep and sunlight and friendships that do not require a performance review. The average age of a commercial fisherman in Alaska is now pushing 55 because almost nobody under 35 wants the job anymore. The average age of a union electrician keeps climbing for the same reason. Pilot shortages are grounding regional airlines. Truck companies are parking rigs because they cannot find drivers willing to be gone 3 weeks at a time for wages that have not kept up with inflation since 1987. And every time another older man retires or gets injured or just burns out, there is nobody waiting to take his place because the young men watched what happened to the last generation and decided the price was too high. Companies are finally starting to wake up and panic. They are raising wages, offering six figure signing bonuses, promising never to enforce return to office mandates, begging men to come back. But the men are not desperate anymore. They have options, they have savings, they have passports full of stamps and crypto wallets and rental properties and side businesses and bodies that are not broken at 35 from carrying the world on their backs. They are polite when the recruiters call, but they are not coming back. Not for double the money, not for triple, because the money was never the point. The point was what the money was supposed to buy. And they already figured out they can buy that without selling their lives to a corporation that will replace them the moment they are no longer useful. And the same pattern is playing out in education. Young men are looking at six figure student debt for degrees that lead to jobs where they will be lectured daily about their privilege by people who make less money than a plumber with 2 years of experience. They are looking at campuses where a false accusation can end their future before it starts. They are looking at graduation ceremonies where the speakers cannot go 5 minutes without reminding them that their gender is the reason the world is broken. And they are choosing trade schools, coding boot camps, apprenticeships, or straight into the workforce where their paycheck does not come with a mandatory struggle session. The result is that women now outnumber men in college by almost 60-40, and in some programs, it is closer to 80-20. Administrators keep celebrating this as a victory for equality while quietly panicking about what happens when the pipeline of male doctors, engineers, veterinarians, pharmacists, and dentists starts to dry up. They keep lowering admission standards for men, offering male only scholarships, creating recruitment programs targeted specifically at boys, because deep down, they know that a society that educates only one gender eventually discovers that the other gender is the one that keeps the lights on. But the men are not coming back to be rescued. They are too busy building lives that do not require permission from people who spent years telling them their existence was the problem. Even the military is feeling it now. Every branch is missing recruiting goals by double-digit percentages year after year. The Army had to lower its standards so many times that people are openly joking about the new slogan being an army of some. The Navy cannot keep ships at sea because they cannot keep sailors on board. The Air Force is grounding planes because they do not have enough pilots or maintainers. And every general who goes on television to talk about the crisis gets asked the same question. Why would any young man sign up to be told that his country hates him, that his masculinity is toxic, that his sacrifice is expected but never appreciated, that he will come home missing limbs to a society that calls him a baby killer and then forgets he exists? The answer is that fewer and fewer of them are willing to sign up at any price. And the ones who do show up are increasingly the ones who just needed a paycheck, not the ones who used to show up because they believed in something bigger than themselves. The warrior class is shrinking, and the culture that spent 20 years telling boys that warriors are the problem is about to discover what happens when there are not enough warriors left to protect the people who spent all that time protesting them. Everywhere you look, the pattern repeats. Any institution that spent the last 2 decades harvesting male energy while simultaneously telling men their energy was toxic is now discovering that the harvest has stopped. And the harvest is not coming back because the men who used to provide it finally realized they do not need the system nearly as much as the system needs them. And here is the part that almost nobody is ready to say out loud. This is not a tantrum. This is not a phase. This is not something that will reverse itself when men get older or hornier or lonelier. This is the new baseline. The men who have made this choice are not waiting for society to apologize. They are not waiting for better incentives. They are not waiting for permission. They are living their lives exactly the way they want to live them. And every year that passes makes it easier, not harder, to keep living that way. And technology is accelerating all of it. Artificial intelligence, remote work, blockchain, decentralized finance, 3D printing, renewable energy, electric vehicles, drone delivery, all of it is collapsing the old barriers that used to force men into lifelong roles they hated just to survive. A man today can live in a small town, earn a six-figure income from anywhere on earth, invest his money in assets nobody can seize, travel for months at a time without asking for vacation days, and never once have to sit through a diversity seminar or worry about being recorded saying the wrong thing in a bar. The old world needed men to be physically present and emotionally invested. The new world lets men be wherever they want, with whoever they want, doing whatever they want, and the leash is getting shorter every single day until one day it will be gone completely. That day is closer than most people think. The women who spent years celebrating independence are now discovering that independence feels very different when there is nobody around to help, when the car breaks down at midnight, or the pipes burst, or the job lays you off, or you just want someone to go to dinner with who is not staring at their phone, calculating how many likes the evening might generate. The strong, independent rhetoric was always built on the assumption that men would still be there in the background, quietly handling all the things that needed to be handled so that independence could feel effortless. Now the background is empty, and the effort is suddenly very real. And the men are not gloating. They are not making videos dancing on the grave of the old system. They are just living. They are calm. They are healthy. They are wealthy. They are free. And the freer they become, the less the old world has to offer them. That is the part the old world still does not understand. You cannot shame a man who no longer cares what you think of him. You cannot threaten a man who has nothing left to lose. You cannot entice a man who has already found something better. The leverage is gone. The power dynamic has flipped, not because men took anything away from anyone else, but because they simply stopped giving away what was theirs to begin with. We are watching the greatest transfer of peace in modern history, and it is happening one quiet Saturday morning at a time, one paid off truck at a time, one solo trip at a time, one early morning gym session at a time, one bank account that keeps growing while nobody else has access to it at a time. The nightclubs were just the first to notice. They will not be the last. And the craziest part of all is that none of this required hate. It only required clarity. Men looked at the world that was offered to them, looked at the price tag attached to it, looked at the fine print that said everything could be taken away the moment someone decided they felt unsafe, and they made a decision that any rational person would make. They chose themselves. And once a man chooses himself, really chooses himself, there is no offer big enough, no guilt trip strong enough, no amount of social pressure powerful enough to make him unchoose himself ever again. That is the new reality. That is where we are. And that is only the beginning. The ripple has now reached the one place the old system always assumed would stay untouched: the family itself. For 70 years, the deal was simple: men trade their freedom, their earning power, and their future flexibility for the promise of a stable home, children who carry their name, and a partner who would stand by them when the body started to break and the hair started to thin. Millions of men kept that bargain even when it became obvious the terms had changed mid contract. They kept showing up, kept paying the mortgage, kept working the second job, kept coaching Little League on weekends, kept believing that if they just tried a little harder, the system would eventually keep its side of the agreement. Then the numbers started coming in, and the numbers do not lie. Marriage rates for men under 40 have fallen off a cliff. In the United States, they are now lower than they were during the Great Depression. And the drop is even steeper in Canada, the UK, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and most of Western Europe. Men are not delaying marriage, they are abandoning it entirely. The percentage of men aged 25 to 34 who have never been married is now approaching 70% in many developed countries, and the trend line is still pointing straight up. The ones who do marry are waiting longer, vetting harder, demanding prenups in numbers that have tripled in 10 years, and increasingly choosing women from cultures that never swallowed the poison pill of modern entitlement. Divorce filings initiated by women have dropped for the first time in decades, not because marriages are suddenly happier, but because there are fewer marriages to dissolve, and because women are finally noticing that the man who walks into family court today is far more likely to walk out owning everything he walked in with. The old playbook of threatened divorce, take the house, take the kids, take half the retirement, take lifelong alimony, is no longer the guaranteed jackpot it used to be. Judges are exhausted, laws are slowly shifting, and men have become extremely good at protecting assets before they ever say I do. Offshore accounts, trusts, crypto cold storage, businesses structured in ways no court can touch, paid off houses, titled only in their name. Men learned fast when the penalty for ignorance became lifetime financial slavery. The result is that women in their late 30s and early 40s are now flooding social media with a new genre of content: the panic video. Where did all the good men go? Why won't men commit? Why are men so damaged? Why are men afraid of strong women? Why are men only interested in 25-year-olds? The questions keep evolving, but the common thread is always the same: something has changed, and it is the men's fault. The possibility that decades of weaponized divorce courts, paternity fraud, default mother custody, and the cultural message that fatherhood is optional disposable labor might have consequences is never seriously entertained. The idea that men simply looked at the risk reward ratio and decided the potential downside was infinite, while the upside was increasingly questionable, is treated like science fiction. But men did the math. They watched their fathers destroyed. They watched their friends destroyed. They watched their bosses destroyed. They read the horror stories every single day on forums that now have millions of members. They saw the statistics: 70 to 80% of divorces initiated by women, 85% of alimony paid by men, 90% of child support paid by men, 95% of workplace deaths men, 90% of homeless men, 80% of suicides men. And then they watched the culture celebrate all of it while telling them their pain was privilege. So they did the only rational thing left to do: they removed themselves from the equation entirely. Birth rates are now collapsing at a speed demographers describe as unprecedented in peacetime. Japan, South Korea, Italy, Spain, Germany, Canada, even the United States. Every developed nation is watching its fertility rate plummet below replacement and then keep falling. Politicians are holding emergency summits. Economists are writing frantic papers about the coming pension crisis. Think tanks are publishing studies with titles like, Where Have All the Babies Gone? And the answer is staring everyone in the face, but almost nobody is willing to say it out loud. Men stopped signing up for a job that pays nothing, costs everything, and comes with a very real chance of ending up broke, alone, and legally barred from seeing the children they spent 20 years raising. The women who spent the 2010s bragging that they did not need a man are now hitting their 40s and discovering that fertility clinics are expensive, sperm donors do not pay child support, and Instagram likes do not push a stroller or fix a leaky roof at 2 a.m. The ones who followed the have it all timeline, career first, kids later, are finding out that biology does not negotiate. Egg freezing is not a guarantee. IVF is not a guarantee. And single motherhood by choice sounds empowering right up until the first time you have to work a 12-hour shift while your toddler has a 103-degree fever and there is no one to call who has a legal obligation to show up. Meanwhile, the men who opted out are healthier, wealthier, and calmer than any generation before them. They are buying land in the country, building small houses with cash, planting gardens, raising livestock, hunting, fishing, lifting, reading, traveling, and sleeping like the dead every night. They are starting businesses that only need a laptop and an internet connection. They are riding motorcycles across continents. They are climbing mountains most people only see in screensavers. They are living lives that look like retirement at 35 because they never had to give half their income to someone who decided one day she was no longer happy. And the best part, the part that keeps the old guard up at night, is that these men are not angry anymore. Anger requires investment. Anger requires hope that things could be different if only the other side would listen. These men have moved past anger into something much more dangerous for the system: indifference. They do not hate women. They do not hate the system. They simply do not care what happens to either one. Their emotional portfolio has been fully divested. Their time horizon is today, tomorrow, and the next adventure. The future of society is someone else's problem now. That indifference is the ultimate red pill, and it is spreading like wildfire. Every day another man wakes up, looks at the life he was told he was supposed to want, looks at the price tag attached to it, looks at the men who paid that price and still lost everything and quietly says no. Every day another man deletes the dating apps, cancels the therapy sessions, stops arguing on the internet, pays off another loan, adds another plate to the barbell, books another flight, and disappears into a life that belongs entirely to him. And every day the gap widens. The gap between the world that was promised and the world that actually exists. The gap between the men who still believe the old rules might someday apply again and the men who have built something new. The gap between the women who still think the old incentives will eventually bring the men running back and the reality that the men have already found something infinitely better. There is no grand negotiation coming. There is no big reconciliation. There is no moment where society says sorry and everything goes back to normal. Normal is dead. The men killed it, buried it, and salted the earth where it used to grow. And they did it without raising their voices, without asking permission, without needing anyone's approval. The nightclubs were the canary in the coal mine. Empty dance floors on Saturday nights were the first visible symptom of a much larger disease. The disease is now everywhere. It is in the birth rate charts. It is in the marriage license offices. It is in the divorce courts that are finally starting to slow down. It is in the human resource departments that cannot fill shifts. It is in the university admissions offices that keep lowering standards for men they spent years telling the world they did not need. It is in the recruitment posters for militaries that cannot meet quotas. It is in the real estate listings for one-bedroom condos bought with cash by 28-year-old men who have never had a girlfriend longer than 6 months and never plan to. This is not a phase. This is the new equilibrium. And the most peaceful part of all is that the men who built it do not need you to understand it. They do not need you to agree with it. They do not need you to celebrate it. They just need you to get out of their way while they keep building it. The future is already here. It is quieter than people expected. It smells like coffee at 6 a.m. and gun oil and wood smoke and freedom. It sounds like an engine turning over on a cold morning and plates clanging in a gym that opens at 5. It feels like sunlight on your face when you realize nobody is expecting anything from you today except yourself. And the men who live there are not coming back. They are home. Now, I want to hear from you. What did you think about everything we just went through? Do you see this playing out in your city, your friend group, your own life? Are you one of the men who walked away? Or are you watching it happen around you and trying to figure out what comes next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Like the video if you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if this one hit home, share it with every man you know who needs to hear it. And just remember, all roads lead to MWA, men walking away. So cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.